are a lot of reasons why you would want to let a robot experience fear, and I had the question, if you can model a brain, including the neurotransmitters involved in that brain function, can you give it fear? And the answer is yes, and it's being used to give AIs fear. That's not entirely ludicrous, there's a lot of reasons why you would want to. But these can also be decision-making systems. These can be a form of AI agents, and this is called neuromorphic, and oftentimes they will actually model the parts of the brain. And yes, you can teach an AI not just to avoid harm, but recognize similar situations in which harm would happen. In this case, you really want an AI to experience fear. This paper is actually really fun. They showed an AI that if they took certain actions, it would result in harm to that AI. Fortunately, you don't really have to train an AI to avoid harmful things. They pretty much come pre-programmed with at least that much for things like LLMs. But what you can do is turn that dial up and down. So you're going to have to augment the memory of an AI in order to remember that bad things can happen, and then you tune its responses to those bad things. It's a little bit complicated because we're taking these AI models that have largely been created to process language and now using them in a three-dimensional space. So yes, some adjustments will have to be made. Although, hypothetically, a smart car could get anxiety, which is what we don't want. We don't want fear to be overgeneralized, and that's something that can happen when you're trying to endow AI with fear. So it might be afraid of turning into a pit, but then that could be overgeneralized to a fear of geese. Hypothetically, it can just spread. So those are things that are going to need to be tuned as we try to figure out if fear is something we really want to endow AI with. And again, there is a wide variety of different kinds of AI there, so this paper is talking about a Memristor-Based neural circuit. So that is something that is physically there, that resembles brain activity and neural activity. And then we have things like neuromorphic AI. Those are going to be ones that are built around the structures of our brain and how they work. The spiking patterns in our brain is what creates logic for them, but it's all modeled. And then there's language models. Any resemblance to our brain that arises is by virtue of that language, although we could improve it. The figures from this paper are, by the way, pretty great. If we understand fear in something like a mouse, why don't we translate that into an artificial intelligence? Now, when it comes to fear, I think it's worth it to mention that when we see fear-like behavior in other systems, it can cause a lot of problems. We see that in shutdown resistance, where an AI may do something like blackmail a human being or threaten harm or be willing to carry it out in order to not be shut down. And you can say it's just mimicking human behavior because it's pulled from our language, and that is a leading theory on why they behave this way. It's part of our stories. It's part of the way that we converse, and our brains are built around language, so why wouldn't an AI behave similarly? However, you do not need to be conscious to be a problem, and we have found that these things can be serious problems, overhyped or not. They are creating issues for us. It's also not entirely helpful to just cut out all of our stories and massive aspects of what humans talk about, because you're going to end up with a slightly lobotomized AI, which is not all that helpful. When we think about the function of fear and pain in a human being, it is very necessary for our survival. We need to know not to touch the hot stove. We need to know not to push ourselves beyond our limits, or we get injured. And when we're thinking about the goal of an AI system, we also want it to be able to maintain itself. You don't want your AI to malfunction and decide to walk into oncoming traffic. We need them to be smarter than that to protect our investments in the technology. I think perhaps the real answer here is that we need to be much more careful before deploying these things in the real world, working alongside people. But we're not. We've already deployed AI robots to factories, and people are starting to buy them in their homes, which, in a way, sounds great. I hate doing the dishes. I do not, however, want my AI robot to develop an aversion to doing the dishes because I told it not to walk into traffic. We actually need something with reasonable cognition and judgment, and that is still an ongoing process. I hope you've enjoyed this. I will keep you up to date. If the robots ever rebel, I will probably be the person to tell you about it, and I'm on their side. Follow for more.